Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Beit Midrash. Hope everybody had a meaningful and joyous Shavuot last week. Hope you got to study some Torah and got to go take a good nap after you stayed up all night studying.
And
We because of the holiday, we didn't meet last week, so we're gonna try to double up. I know we don't love doing that. We're going to have to do that at least one more time because 4th of July, for some reason, decided to fall on a Thursday also. But you know, we will persist and we will move forward. So we'll start with I feel like persist wasn't the right word, but the right word wasn't coming. Prevail. That's the word I was trying to think.
Soldier on.
Soldier on. There you go. The word wasn't coming to me. So anyway, Parshat Naso, last week's Parsha in the Torah reading, and Rabbi Sacks' commentary on it, on his always lovely Judaism's life-changing ideas, which I think is probably showing up backwards on your screen, but I can't do a whole lot about that at the moment. Any thoughts, comments, reactions to Parshat Naso and lifting heads?
Yeah, I thought that his commentary about the use of the word naso was just fascinating. As for counting was fascinating. I don't know if that is an unusual commentary or whether you've seen that before, but thought it was interesting.
I've seen variations. I mean, it's an interesting question of why does Naso, why does it use the phrase Naso et Roshan, like right? Like Naso et Rosh. Like why did it use that instead of other ones? There is a lot of commentary on it. This was a good one too.
When you look at what he says about the translation of Naso, to lift, okay, you lift your head and be counted. To carry and to forgive, I thought that to forgive was interesting because to forgive, you are lifting your relationship with the other person, you are lifting them, or you're lifting yourself. Sometimes when you need to forgive, you're helping the other person to feel better, but you also are helping yourself to forgive them and get out from under that, I don't know, intense pressure of being upset with someone. So that part seemed to fit. I'm not familiar with the verb at all, but the forgive part was interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a part of it in which it's in some sense lifting the transgression and to remove it, right? Like I kind of like what you said better. I think that's how I've often seen it used in that context, as if you're kind of lifting up the transgression to move it as if it's not there. But I kind of like yours, like you're lifting the relationship. Right? So when somebody has offended you, when somebody has hurt you, your relationship has kind of lowered somewhat. And now when you forgive them, you're lifting it back up to where it was.
That's a relationship that you have known. I tended to read it as a relationship that could be, but won't unless you stop and say hello and how are you. I see it on the public street. I remember being very ashamed, and not ashamed, but embarrassed because my dad tipped his hat to every man and stepped off the sidewalk. If you were elderly, black, white, or indifferent, you stepped to the side. And I guess I was thinking the same thing when I built a house downtown. Who then will require me, will not require me, but I did it very consciously, that I will talk to everyone on the street. I will say hello equally, because there are too few places in the South where people are considered equal. What else?
I said that's a little bit of a Sacks's point, right? That or his big idea that you are as important as you make other people feel.
Oh, I know what I can illustrate it with, though, is going to vote in my almost all Black voting box at the city hall or county courthouse, right there on the square. I went in with everybody else on, it would have been 2008, the first time Obama ran. And I've noticed time and time and time again that still slavery's gone, but Black people do not walk down the street regularly looking at everybody in the eye. But after voting, these same people walked out with their shoulders back, their heads up, and a huge smile on their faces. They had been lifted up.
Other thoughts, comments, reactions? Parshat Naso and lifting heads.
How about a question? Oh, can we do a question? Or can I count that as my
You just
thought?
did.
So pretty early on when he's talking about how people count and Tower of Babel, a brick falls, everybody gets concerned, but person falls, big deal, no big deal. But he mentions that 100 million people are killed in the 20th century in Russia, in China, in Cambodia. Why does he skip the Holocaust?
I don't know for sure. My gut says because it was too obvious an example.
Yeah.
Like he's, Rabbi Sacks is an Orthodox Jew writing to a Jewish audience. They know the Holocaust. So I think in his, this is just my gut intuition, is that he's like, that's a too obvious example. But, we might not think naturally of Stalin's Russia, Mao's communist China, and Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge. Like, those are things that we don't, as Jews, often think about as often. Does that exclude the Holocaust? No, I think he's just providing other examples. Which, what's the number he says? You said 100,000, which sounds...
No, he said almost 100
almost
million.
100 million, sorry. 100 million is a lot more than 6 million.
I think he is woefully underestimating the education level of his audience, or else he is woefully limiting his audience. And you're saying, that's your own opinion. Margaret already agreed with you. That's two opinions here. And nobody's on my side that why couldn't he have stretched it and said the obvious? So I don't know whether he...
I wondered about the British radio and television audiences who were watching him regularly. And I would think they wonder.
Well, maybe
So-
the next
so
portion, he does
A couple things.
mention
I'm not
industry.
sure this was, done as a radio or TV thing, like this particular
No, I'm
speech.
saying that there was an audience there built
Maybe.
up other things he did.
But I'll maybe put it this way. I'd be a lot more concerned if we hadn't read so much Sacks already, in which he does talk about the Holocaust. He does acknowledge it. He does talk about the horrors of it. Like it's not like he's repeatedly avoiding the Holocaust or not mentioning it, right? Like he doesn't right here. Okay. But if it was like a repeated cycle, I think I'd be a little more inclined to agree with your skepticism. I'm not as bothered because I know he does it elsewhere, right?
I saw it a little bit differently, and that was that he was, if you think of the Holocaust, at least I think what comes to mind is prejudice. Anti-Semitism, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. I think in these examples, what he is bringing to mind is simply the mass disregard for individual people.
And Margaret, that's the way I took it too. I thought that was a way to really point out that he's saying those people, it seemed not to matter to anybody, that we don't know about those people. But I feel like in the Holocaust, since that time, we have tried to enumerate or tell the story of everybody that we can. So we have tried to make those people known and show the meaning in their lives.
And if I was his editor, I would have added 5 words in addition to the Holocaust, in addition to, because I think, yes, it's something his audience knows. Yes, he's spoken about before. I do think there is a difference in the Holocaust compared to just, wiping out people. But other societies have had a big effort to bring back memories of their people that have happened. But that's a good point, that there's a big difference in why. It's not a good point for him to have it. But I complain about him all the time, so no problem.
I had a different reaction to that paragraph generally. He writes at the end, at the very moment when one might be maximally tempted to see people as just numbers, namely when taking a census as here, the Israelites were commanded to lift people's heads, to raise their spirits, to make them feel they counted as individuals, not numbers in a mass, ciphers in a crowd. There's something about being acknowledged as an individual that the Torah is trying to lift up. That you might be a number in a crowd, but there's something as an individual that is important and valuable. That's what Sacks's argument generally is. But what stuck out to me is thinking through what we've been seeing lately over the last few months in terms of protests. What are the protesters often doing? They're wearing masks. They're wearing sunglasses. They're wearing scarves and keffiyehs as ways to not identify themselves, to hide their identity, and to minimize their individuality. Which I don't know if anybody else has any thought. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days now. I'm not sure I have any profound answers other than I think it speaks a little bit to their ideology as compared to what the Torah is trying to teach and what Sacks is arguing the Torah tries to teach. That if you take a view,
complaining.
Pardon?
Chapters ago about, weren't we just complaining a few chapters ago that the census didn't include women?
I didn't quite catch all of that.
She said, weren't we complaining just a few chapters ago that the census didn't count women?
Right, the women are only numbers. You got it, Laura. We're less than a number.
But anybody else have thoughts, reaction? That stick out to anybody else, or
That kind of thought about women sort of spun me off on a different direction, and I'm not sure. I would like you to repeat the point that you were making about the people wearing masks and,
so I think where I'm going is, what Sacks is arguing is that by lifting heads, the Torah is teaching us to make people feel counted as individuals, not numbers in a mass. But what are the masses who are protesting trying to do? They're trying to hide their individuality. They're trying to minimize their identification and become numbers in a mass.
and
So,
what follows from that in your mind?
And I think in my mind, it speaks to some ideological differences, which I think I've been trying to struggle with for the last couple days looking over this. That if as Sacks says, we believe that every Jew is a son or daughter of God, and that therefore every individual is important, which the Mishnah tells us 2nd century CE that we are holding this. What are we doing when we're minimizing our identity, when we are intentionally trying to submerge into the mass? We're in some way denying that individuality that God gave us. And I think that's what the protesters are trying to, I think there is some of it in which they are trying to protect themselves, but I think there is some level of it's not important. Like, the individual lives aren't important. It's the numbers that count. And Sacks is making the opposite argument, is like the numbers, when you turn it into numbers, you're diminishing the divinity of each of the individuals that are in there.
They remind me of the Ku Klux Klan.
Say more. I'm not going to argue it, but
I hadn't noticed the idea of the masks and the protesters. So I looked at some anti-Israel protesters. I just looked up random pictures on Google, and I saw a lot of the COVID type mask, and a number of people had the mask, but it was pushed down. Or if we're looking at keffiyehs and it's tied around the head, okay. If it's you're only seeing in the back, okay. And there were a significant number of masks either pushed down or not. I wouldn't say it was the majority. And then I looked at side by side a picture of pro-Israel protesters. I didn't see any masks. So if the masks were there to protect from airborne diseases, okay, maybe. But the people in the pro-Israel picture didn't have them either. So
well, the students didn't want to get expelled. They didn't want their identities known when they were occupying the campus.
Yeah, there's been some question of how many of the protesters were actually students. But I'm nowhere near knowledgeable enough to give you statistics other than Stephen Wright's statistic. Stephen, the comedian, Stephen Wright. says, 86.7% of all statistics are made up. That was a joke, but okay.
Mm.
So that was kind of the thought that it's stuck out to me. I'm not sure I've gotten very far with it, but I thought I'd raise the question to you guys and see if you had better, more insight than I might have.
Can I say something, Rabbi? It's Martin.
Please.
I feel very uncomfortable. I'm kind of with you on that. For me, it's just being uncomfortable that if somebody puts on a mask, what is the reason for it? I'm not talking about the mask for the germs or whatever. It just makes me feel very uncomfortable. And if somebody is willing to put on a mask, to me, it's just, what are they hiding? It could be their identification, but if they're protesting correctly, they shouldn't be having a mask on. It's okay to protest, but it's not okay to do some sinister act. And so I just have a general feeling of uncomfortableness like you, I believe. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Look, I can think of a couple congregants who still wear masks when they're in large gatherings because they do have health concerns of various sorts. And I'm 100, and COVID could potentially devastate them much more than the average individual. Fully supportive of that if that's why they're wearing it. I just have a hard time believing there's that percentage of young college age and 20 students who are that health at risk, that like whose health is that at risk at some kind of airborne disease. So I mean, I would fully support them if wearing a health mask, if that's what it was. I'm just having a hard time believing that's what it is.
During these discussions, I am always so reminded of my grandfather, who lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, and there was an active Ku Klux Klan at that time, and his remark, often repeated by my mother, that he saying that he would never belong to an organization or never do anything that he would not do that he wouldn't do with his face uncovered.
Wise words. So look, the Parshat Naso, I don't think is, it's a very important point and a very important idea that Rabbi Sacks is lifting up, that, we should treat everybody as if they are in God's image, as if they are a child of God, as if they're, there's a piece of divinity in them. I'm not sure it's, something we haven't heard before, but it's a conversation worth repeating. What about his conversation in Parshat Bahalotecha, which is this week's parsha?
I have one more question about Naso. And
please.
It comes to the point about being made in God's image. Okay, everybody on this screen has heard it a bunch of times. But what about the outside world? Do you think average Bethel congregants or average people Ellen meets on the streets in Birmingham or Alabama or the world or whatever, how widespread do you think that conscious thought is?
So I'll say two things. I'll say one, I'm not sure. I don't think that's a popular Christian doctrine that everybody is created in God's image and that we are all reflections of the divine. I'm not sure that is as foundational to Christian theology as it is to Jewish theology. And on the flip side, I'm not sure how much Rabbi Sacks is really speaking to a non-Jewish audience.
I wasn't asking him, I was asking you.
Oh no, I understand. I'm just saying, like, I
She'll come
my
out.
point is, like, is it important for Rabbi Sacks to say yes? Is it important for Jews to hear yes? I don't know how much a non-Jew is going to be picking up this book and being like, wow, I never thought of it. Just because I don't know how many non-Jews are going to be reading Rabbi Jonathan Sacks.
My thought
It's-
really was in the wider political arena. If we believed that everybody was created in God's image, we might not have the same perspective on people who are different from us.
Yes, 100% agree.
And that is, of course, interesting that he, in fact, raises this precise point when he talks about talking with Christians, and where Christians, when you know the whole thing he says about believing in that Jesus.
Picking another friend. You run big shark and little shark.
But on the other hand, I'm reminded of the Quakers, whose foundational, and that is a branch of Christianity, of course, more on the more obviously, I guess, on the west side. I mean, on the west coast than on the east coast. But their foundational belief is that there is God's light within everybody. So I think that's very similar to the Jewish belief, phrased a little differently.
Yeah, I think the Jewish belief is that each person is created in God's image, and therefore you should treat each person accordingly, as if, in some way, as if you are dealing with God in that moment. I don't think the Christian foundational theology is the same in that sense. I think they see faith as a larger focus of their as more foundational. So the kind of the idea of brothers in Christ, or the Catholic Church, those that are together in their faith and their belief, which does create an inclusionary and exclusionary part. Those who are our brothers in faith, yes. Everybody else, no. But I don't want to go too deep into Christian theology because I'm not a Christian theologian. So, but no, I don't think everybody. I don't think this is a widespread belief or a widespread knowledge. It's just.
No, I was just talking about Quakers in particular. Not
I understand. I was just responding to Barbara's question. Like, I don't think it is a widespread belief in the larger non-Jewish world. I'm not sure it's a full belief in the Jewish world. I think there's plenty of Jews who don't know it either, which is a good thing that Rabbi Sacks is teaching it. It's something that I speak about not infrequently. So I do think hopefully the average Bethel attendee does know something about it, because I've hopefully mentioned it enough times that they've heard it. But
and I'll start buying ads in the Bethel Buzz, or whatever we're calling it at this moment, so that the people who don't attend might also be aware of this. I think it's important in terms of how we're dealing with each other. And if we can get it through Bethel, then we can get it out through town, and then we can get out through the state and the region. We might reach some people that have the power to legally get to the Supreme Court or something like that, or at least the president.
Look, there is an astonishing amount of violence, death, poverty, and whatnot that very well could be resolved if we said, this person's different than us, but still created in God's image. And so maybe I should treat them that way. We haven't gotten there, but it would be nice.
Well, in fact, we do the opposite when we're at war with some other group. We tend to dehumanize them by calling them names and,
Yes. Either we turn them into numbers, as Rabbi Sacks says, or as you just said, we dehumanize them. That was one of the Nazis' propaganda tactics, is they, depicted Jews as rats, as dogs, as animals, as if they're not human and therefore not worthy of respect.
and in Vietnam, it was the gooks and
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And now it's the vermin who are infesting her.
yeah, now we are the vermin.
Exactly.
Which is something very, very interesting that's happening on the news now is I'm kind of in a situation where I'm forced to watch Fox News sometimes. And they are just railing against the anti-Semitism. I think because maybe the other media have been, how can I say, sympathizing with the anti-Israel protesters. But since I think that the whole Trump crowd is going to turn on the Jews at some point, it's just interesting to me now that they are just defending the Jews like crazy.
Well, I will say,
hopefully I'm wrong.
I say there has been some talk lately. I think Dr. Deborah Lipstadt started talking about it, and people have been using what they're calling the horseshoe analogy. So, horseshoes are opposite, but they bend and meet somewhere at the bottom. And she's kind
No,
of
they don't.
They kind of come down.
They bend, but they don't meet at the bottom.
They get close at the bottom. They come down and they get close towards the end.
Okay.
That her analogy is that the far right and the far left are in completely different political places, but they're coming down in the same place against Jews. That's kind of where she's going. Is that they bend, they go away from each other, but somehow they end up in kind of a similar place. In their spewing of anti-Semitism, they're taking it from different places and they're taking different examples, but they're coming to the same conclusions. Which is probably, I definitely do see where she's coming from in using that analogy. Is they're.
Laura, could you say some more? Because I do not watch Fox News and do not need to watch Fox News. But are you saying that Fox News is railing against anti-Semitism?
I think she may have frozen.
Yeah, I think she's right.
I guess she froze. Eddie, are you?
I think that Fox News is more negative toward the pro-Palestinian protesters than the other networks who seem to be fair in some cases, but tend to favor the protesters more.
Oh, okay.
That's the way I took it.
So I do want to try to make sure we get to the second part too. So any thoughts when we get to Parshat Behalatecha? And
okay, what does the name of the parsha mean?
I believe it's like when you go in, you're going up, like
In
when you go,
the
when you ascend.
in the ascent. Okay, so I got the in the part, but I didn't know what the other part was.
Yeah. But you know, that's not the part that Rabbi Sacks really drashes on, but that's you know, when you
No.
he's saying when you mount is the way that our Chumash translates it, like when you mount the lamps, because it talks about the lampstands and the menorah. So it's, you know, when
Oh.
you mount, which does mean like when you lift up and put it.
Okay, I must have elided over that part. Thank you.
No problem. You know, he focuses on a different section, not on the menorah, which
Right.
he's perfectly right to do if he wants. But you know, he takes us a lot about into friendship. So thoughts, comments,
That
reactions.
Well, he starts out with the people being complaining and what he does about them complaining. And Rabbi Sacks deals a lot with the complaining about the food. Okay, we're tired of this amount of stuff. It's no longer, we want fish, we want cucumbers, we want this, we want that. And it reminded me of college days, either as the professor or the student. Everybody complains about the cafeteria food. Or if you're in a hospital or a residential facility, what else are you going to complain about? You're going to complain about the food. So it's amusing in a sense that they're complaining about the food, and it's maybe a cover-up for everything else they want to complain about. That, well, this or that or the other thing. But of course, what Rabbi Sacks wants to talk about is the fact that that God and Moses have a conversation about what God should tell Moses to do.
I will say, you know, this section always does astound me in the Torah. And it's interesting because it really talks about our sense of nostalgia. I don't know if this is a word. We really nostalgize things in an incredible way.
Like politics. We want the good old days. Let's make
America
great again.
We miss the garlic and the cucumbers and the fish that we used to eat in Egypt. Do you not remember how they used to beat you when you were there? Do you not remember all the things that the Egyptians did to you? But you miss the garlic and the cucumbers and the leeks and the fish and whatever else, right? Like it's really Margaret, maybe you can say more than I can, but it's really an amazing psychological thing that we have to nostalgize the past.
Is that a real word, nostalgize?
I have no idea, but I like it.
But it is poignant, or it makes its point anyhow. Yeah, well, we certainly do have a great, and I have nothing profound to say except that I think you're right. We have a great ability to remember the good things and forget the bad things that happened at certain times.
Yeah. And I've been doing some other readings, and it's interesting in that a lot of them are coming to the opposite of how there's kind of a move in our society to do the opposite now, to focus on all the horrible things in the past and how terrible the past was. And we forget that there was some good things in it too.
Oh, wait a moment, dude, I can't agree with you. I mean, all this stuff about make America great again, and everything used to be all wonderful, I don't know, in Reagan's era or whatever, all those kinds of things. It seems to me that that a good part of the of the society is exactly doing what you're saying
Oh,
is nostalgia.
Yes, and what's the opposite side do?
Oh, you mean you think the opposite side is saying we're all terrible?
Um, I'm just pulling up an article because I read it earlier today. Let me see if I can find it. The site that he says, a growing number of Americans, especially younger ones, have little to no idea of what it means to be an American. They have a weak grasp of the principles on which the country was founded. And going down, like later, he says, the notion, patriotism, he's talking about patriotism. Patriotism also means rebutting the self-loathing that now typifies so many discussions about America's past and present. From the notion that our founding fathers were nothing more than hypocritical racists to the argument that white supremacy remains the dominant fact of American life.
Well, that's just plain ignorance. That's seems
that's being circulated out there as well. So
I'm just saying, I think it's a different, if that ignorance is a different process from the presence or lack of nostalgia for a different era.
Yes. So, I mean, look, we're getting a little off track of Sacks's commentary, but it was just, it is something that always strikes me with this section of, we miss all the food that we used to eat in Egypt. Well, that's there's some disconnect there. Like, we miss what we ate, even though we were treated absolutely horribly. And do you really think they ate that well in Egypt in the first place? Like, slaves really sitting around eating fish and garlic and leeks and cucumber, like anyway. But to his larger point about faith and friendship, I feel like his summary of, did you have something, Barbara?
I do, but maybe you're getting ready to go into it.
No, go ahead.
At the bottom of page 198, he refers to an essay by Rabbi Soloveitchik, The Lonely Man of Faith.
Yes, she's referring to a footnote, in case you're not.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand, or I don't know, I couldn't figure it out from that, what Soloveitchik said. That's so, as he said, not the only way Jewish spirituality has been understood through the ages. If you have some clarification to offer on what Soloveitchik is talking about, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I will preface by saying I have not yet read the essay. It is a very well-known essay. I think I have it on my pile of books that I'm trying to get through to read. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
And I didn't Google it, which I guess I could have maybe found a Cliff's notes to it. But I think I already disagree with you.
So my understanding is what Soloveitchik argues is, on one hand, we are supposed to be masters of our creation. Like, God has given us this world and we're supposed to control it in some way. That's part of the first chapter. That's part of what Genesis tells us. But there's also a level at which we're in relationship with God and need to submit to what God asks us to do. And what faith tries to have us weave those two together. So that's the struggle we go through as individuals, is how do we take the spiritual submissiveness to God and put it into the physical world in which we inhabit. And he my understanding is he kind of describes that as a struggle, Jen, that each of us is trying to go through.
I didn't understand whether he means or whether that struggle is making man lonely because he's trying to work out his faith. That's completely opposite to my understanding that synagogues, shuls, etc., can be a center of community, a center of friendship. And that wouldn't be, I mean, that's not my own opinion, because everybody knows the story about, you know, Rabbi Henkin goes to synagogue to talk to God, but I go to talk to Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Goldberg and all my community friends.
Yeah.
And I think if you move to a new town, I would certainly recommend join your local faith community so that you get to start on creating friends in your new area where you don't know anybody.
So my understanding, I might be mistaken, but my understanding is that Soloveitchik's argument is that this is an individual struggle that you go through, and that your relationship with God is what eases the loneliness that you feel in doing it. And I think what you're saying is exactly what Sacks is arguing. What Sacks says that's his critique of Soloveitchik, is he says that's one possible reading, but not the only. Right, and that's his argument here, is that you can't be a good Jew on your own entirely. You need a community. You need other people. You need friends. Moses can't even do it by himself. God needs to tell him to get other people. Yitro tells him, he's like, that's a way. It's interesting that Zach says it like that. He's like, he's reminding him what Yitro told him, like way back when. He's like, do you remember that, your father-in-law told you to do this like long time ago? Like, go do it already.
Although those are two different things, actually. In that, what Yitro said was that you can't do all of this work by yourself. And what God is telling Moses or providing for Moses at this point is not only helpmeets, but helpers, but friendships.
Yes. True, there is like a somewhat different level, but there is a somewhat different level between what God says and what Yitro says. But it is interesting that he does Sacks does bring in the Yitro part too. But that you can't do it, you can't lead by yourself, you can't live by yourself. You need a community, you need friends to help guide you through.
I really agree with Sacks on that. And what I love is what he says about Soloveitchik, which is what I always think about Sacks, that anything he says flows from the specifics of his life and time. So he's saying about Soloveitchik the same thing that I always think about Sacks. Yep, British Orthodox guy, his perspective is different. So
yeah, and truth is, people will probably look at your published articles down the line and say, Dr. Brandy's work was a specifics of her life and times.
In science, it always works that way. Somebody does something new. So all my work on pyro garnets, all my work on aftershocks, happens all the time in science. But this is religion.
Yeah, and I don't think it's different. People will look. People will look at what I what I say, people ever read my sermons in 10, 15 years, even or more, they'll say, that was particular to that particular time and place and the environment in which he grew up. There are rabbis that I look at, I'm like, I strongly disagree with them, but it's probably the right message for the community that they're in, right? Like the people that they're talking to, that's what those people need to hear, even if it's not the one that I agree with. Religion's not static. Religion changes as well. So, philosophy changes. Philosophy is a product of our life and times, and the life and times that we're going through also. But
I liked how he talks about the influence your friends can have on
Yes.
you, and how you have to be very careful, or you should be very careful in considering who your friends are going to be. I agree with that. I recommend that to my kids. I used to make it easier to have play dates with some kids than other kids. But what about if all the good people you want to be your friend so that you can grow up and be like them just don't want to be friends with you? Be my rabbi. Tell me how to work that out.
There's, first of all, you don't want to be friends with people because you want to be like them.
Well, in a sense, you do, and Sacks even, I thought Sacks even said, be the college kid whose friends are, doing their work, rather than the college kid whose friends are out playing around. I forget exactly what.
Yeah, I mean, I think what his point is more is that you surround yourself with good people, and good people will lift you up to be a good person. So if your friends are active, happy, and have healthy habits, likely is you will too. And if they're not active and they don't have healthy habits and they're miserable, chances are they'll drag you down. That's, I think, more of his point. Not that you should be surrounding yourself with people you want to be like, but that you want to surround yourself with good people. You want to surround yourself with people that hold the right similar values that you do, and that will help you continue to grow in who you are also.
That's not different from what I'm saying, that I see the people who are working hard at their studies, who this, they still might be pushing me away. And so it's no, you can't sit at our table in the library. That actually didn't happen to me. I was with the tables in the library crowd. But I could see how, there are the people who have the better habits, and they just don't think that you're one of them. And that was just, a theoretical question. How do you advise someone to, and I guess you could go back to the original one. You can't control what they do. You can only control how you act about it, and therefore, make a different decision.
Yes, and you can't force people to be friends. Somebody doesn't want to be friends with you, nothing you do is going to change that. So what do? You do the best that you can do, and you find the people who still have the values that you're trying to hold. Just might not be this 1-2 group of individuals. You'll have to find other ones that the right people will love you and care for you because you're you, not because you're not them.
And I think he's also making a point which is borne out by research, which is that the choices or the values or whatnot that certainly young people have are significantly more influenced by their peers than by their parents.
Which is why parents are always big into trying to make sure they have good peers, that they're hanging around good people and not around bad people who will bring them down to their level. But
he says, choose your friends.
Yes.
Choose friends who are what you aspire to be. Maybe a bigger part of that is evaluate what you aspire to be. And
yeah,
choose
I think there's a
people.
little bit of that. He does say he does kind of say there's some people who can't do that, right? He says, bottom of 200, I've met young offenders who grew up in abusive families and violent neighborhoods with little choice and little hope. They don't have a choice of who their friends are going to. We need to help them, not condemn them for their choices. Many of us do have a choice, and we need to exercise it well. Surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with people of faith who try to make you a better person. Surround yourself with people who are healthy, who try to make you a healthier person, who have values that try to make you a better person. Not people who are, going to make you a worse person. There's a great song that came out within the last year or so by a band called Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors, who I've been listening to for like 20 years now, which is hard to believe. It's called Find Your People. And this is basically the gist of the song is, find the people who you want to stay up all night with and talk with. Find the people who get the inside, who you have the jokes with. Find the people who aren't going to agree with you and just tell you yes, but are going to push you to be a better person. And the chorus of the song is, you find your people, then you find yourself. That when you find those people who really mean a lot to you and who are really good friends and who can lift you up, that's when you're really going to live your life the best that you can. If you want a homework assignment, I know Barbara keeps off giving you guys homework assignments. So if you want a homework assignment, go listen to that song because it's a good song. But I also love this thing at the bottom that at the very end of his teaching, that Judaism is foundational beliefs, but it is fundamentally about something else. Faith is the redemption of solitude. It's about relationships. It's about us and God, us and our family, us and our neighbors, us and our people, us and humankind. Judaism is not about the lonely soul. It is about the bonds that bind us to one another and to the author of all. So, as we go forth after this class, build those relationships, all of them, with your family, with your friends, with your neighbors, with everybody else, and with God as well. And that there's been a lot of research about how lonely people are these days. There's a solution to that. Find your people who are going to make sure you're not. And choose the people who will make sure you're never lonely. Any concluding thoughts, questions, comments?
I wanted to say one thing, Rabbi, before we left. It's the 70 of the elders of Israel. They're all Jewish, I assume, don't you think? And they had to get to the promised land, which they made it there. And they're probably all were very unique and might not have had the same beliefs and the same ideas about things, but they had to pull together to get to Israel. And I'm just hoping, for our country, that we can lift everybody up regardless of what happens in this election and get to where we're supposed to go.
Yes. One of the things one of the stories I have the feeling I'll be reciting frequently over the next 5 months or 4.5 months, whatever it is. There's a story of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai that's told in the Talmud, where they're arguing a halachic point for 3 years, and finally a divine voice says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both of these are the words of the living God. To which the obvious question is, they disagree. How can they both be right? But the voice also says halacha follows Beit Hillel. So why does it follow Beit Hillel if they're both right? It says that Beit Shammai would always argue their opinion and then teach Beit Hillel's opinion, whereas Beit Hillel would always teach Beit Shammai's opinion first and only then would teach their own. I say, imagine how Congress would look if, the Democrats said, this is what the Republicans believe, and this is why, this is their arguments, this is their reasons for coming to these conclusions, this is what they're saying, and now this is why we're going to disagree with in this form. And on the flip, what if the Republicans were to say, we understand the Democrats are making these points down the line, and we understand their arguments, we understand why they're coming to the conclusions and they want, this is why we disagree. Imagine how, if you actually took the time to understand each other's arguments, you could actually, make progress. But it takes time to sit there and listen and understand and not just dismiss each other out of disdain that you dare disagree with what I said. There's a sense that, if we believe that God created this world and God is somehow transcendent beyond our current understanding, then to think that you always have the answers is awfully arrogant. You have opinions, you have thoughts, and you might have some understanding that you've learned over time, which is great, and you should share that. But to think you always have the correct answer is a dangerous place to be in. And when you're in charge, when you're in a leadership position of anything, that makes it all the more dangerous.
Well, at least Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel accurately described the beliefs of the other.
Like, that's one of the key parts of that teaching, is that they took the time to understand the other person's argument.
They had the will to understand.
Exactly. They took the time and they had the desire to say, I want to know why you believe what you believe and where you're coming from. And we've kind of lost that somewhere. So that's, to me, that's one of the keys for progress going forward, is the ability to say, I know we disagree. Tell me why you're coming to help me understand your argument. And then once they do, have the other person being willing to understand your argument, where you're coming from in yours. Until we get there, it's going to be a long way. But we don't walk it alone. We walk it with each other and with our friends and our companions. So, another Drew Holcomb song. Take courage when the road is long, and don't ever forget you're never alone. that feels like a good note to end on. Next week, I am out of town, so you guys are still more than welcome to meet and discuss Parshat Shalach, Shalach Lecha. The following week, I will also be out of town, but it's also July 4th, so we won't have class. So in the 3 weeks, we'll discuss my calendar phone. We'll discuss at least I found the pin. We'll discuss Korach and Chukat on July 11th. So next week, you guys are good for Shalach Lecha, and then we'll do Korach and Chukat on the 11th. And then God, as I said in my email, God willing, we won't have to do another double up on Parshiot until Rosh Hashanah, which also happens to fall on a Thursday. So, in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we might have to double up. But that actually, no, because Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat. So we can do Rosh Hashanah after Shabbat. We'll figure it out. I have to look at the calendar, which I'm not doing. The point is, you don't have to worry about it.
Can you tell me whether can the audience or everybody else say whether we're going to meet for Shalach or not, and who's going to lead?
I will be out of town and will not be here next week.
Anybody want to or not want to? I will if people want to.
I think I'm in New York.
Okay.
Look, if a lot of you are out of town, what we'll probably do then is do Shalach and Korach on the 11th, and then we'll have to do Chukat and Balak on the 18th, and then we won't have to double up for a while. But if somebody can let me know what you guys end up doing next week, that would be appreciated, just so I know what to prepare going forward.
There's great geology in Chukat.
Chukat.
There's good geology in that. So that's one I'd love to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Well, there's also cows, but yes.
I only said 5 minutes, 4 minutes. We can make it 3.
Sounds good. Well,
now
everybody be well. Take care of yourselves. Stay cool. Stay hydrated. For those who are traveling, Nasiat Tova, safe travels. And I will look forward to learning with y'all in 3 weeks. And again, if somebody can just let me know if you end up learning next week or not, that would be appreciated, just so I know what's going on.
I'm putting in my vote for no next week.
I'm good either way.
I'm going to take next week off as well.
So it sounds like the next 2 weeks, you guys get a break, and then we'll catch up, start catching up on the 18th. But we'll get through. Don't worry.
for today.
Be well, everybody. Take care and safe travels.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.